it's overwhelming, but it's also our jobs.
Our job is only going to get harder.
It's worrisome.
This is something that's unprecedented.
Now is not the time to be a cowboy. No one has anything to prove. We're all in this together.
Welcome to the reporting from the frontline of a pandemic. I'm Mercado, and I'm here with Mandy Cordero.She is the 5 p.m. producer at WTSP News 10 in Tampa, Florida. Thanks, Mandy, for joining me.
Yeah, no problem. Excited. How are you?
Good. How about you?
Oh, man, going through a lot.
So my first question I want to ask you is, how have you had to adjust to the way you work?
Yeah, well, I mean, everything is different now. Most of our staff is working from home. We do a lot of live shots now from our anchors, like living rooms. I produce from my dining room table. We do a lot of things online. We use like Slack and emails a lot more just because we're over communicating everything right now. And we've had to build so many different systems just to be able to work from home. And then we had to kind of change our focus and how we tell stories and what stories we are picking based on what people are searching for at the moment, because every week there's an interest in something different. So it's also been like sort of like a change in how you think and how you talk, because a lot of people are scared right now, and you really have to be there for them and like, we don't want to scare them anymore by giving all this like really bad news, because there's just so much going on that right now, specifically my station is focusing on facts, not fear. And that's our brand across Tegna. About like, we're going to talk to you like you're one of us, like we're friends. We are giving you information, not trying to scare you. I feel like that's what a lot of people need right now.
And you just brought up that Tegna's doing facts over fear when it comes to their stations and covering it. So how has the network dealt with covering the news of the pandemic by the way of facts over fear? Like how they've been expanding the content they've been doing on the newscasts and everything else?
Yeah, so it's a lot of deeper dive stories and explainers, and not so much of like file video of people walking around in masks to explain a story, a headline that you saw. We're actually like going beyond that. And it's because a lot of people are seeing these headlines come across their like social media feeds, their phones. So we are doing a lot of explainers. We'll take whatever that headline is and put it into context for you. And we focus a lot on getting information from experts. We just want to make sure that we're getting everything right. And then we cross that with another expert just to make sure that it is correct. A lot of graphics. We're using a lot of graphics as opposed to, like I said, file video that doesn't really pertain to the story or explain it well enough. Yeah, it's a lot of like deeper dive stories.
And since there's so much stuff and so many stories and press conferences going on revolving around this virus and the effects of it and everything, how do you go about like selecting the stories to pick for your newscasts that you build?
Oh yeah, there's we have like 5 news conferences a day, and a lot of them come in late. We have the White House presser every day at between 5 and 6 o'clock. So we're always floating around our stories based on that. It's a lot of like over preparing. I put together a lot of backup scripts just in case the governor, if he talks at 5 o'clock and it goes for like 45 minutes, then I can't take a package after that. I have to start pulling in VOSOTs and VOs and graphic explainers as opposed to longer form pieces. So it's a lot of like, I'll put my show together and then I'll put a side show together so that when it's time to split things up and once I start killing stories, I'll just start pulling the shorter versions of it into my show so that we still have that information, and it fits in the time slot. So it's every time I go into my rundown meeting, I always start by saying like, please understand my rundown is fluid. Not everything can change based on what happens. And honestly, that's happened every day at this point. So it's just like staying on your toes.
And who writes these stories that you talk about? Since you have all these stories written up, is a reporter like write the stories, or do you have writers at the station that write them, or how does it go about writing them, or do you write your own, or how do you do it?
Yeah, so the reporters have their assigned stories. I think right now I have like 10 reporters a day, and that includes like my investigates team. For the most part, I write most of the stories. We don't have any writers, but we do have associate producers. They help like with everything. Like I need them to write a VO or help edit some graphics. We have that. Also, my station doesn't have editors, so we are kind of like all encompassed producers. We write, we edit, we make graphics, produce the show.
And what's been like so far the hardest thing about covering this pandemic since it all started?
The overload of information, because it's literally my job to take everything that happened during the day and like filter it into this show. And you have to like do it and just think about what affects the most people and what's the most important information we got to get out right now, because there is just so much information happening that I can't just say like, well, the bus line, something happened with, like something really small happened. I have to like start thinking about the bigger picture and who is affecting, like I said, the deeper dive of a story, as opposed to just being like, here's a headline that happened.
And another question I want to ask you is more like, since all this started, how has covering this pandemic as producer, like how has it impacted you as a person and as a producer, and kind of like how you make the news you do, basically?
I don't know. It's not easy. I'm gonna start with that. It's not easy. And like I said, we had to kind of change how we thought, because I've always gone in thinking like you gotta have thick skin because like all this bad stuff is gonna happen. But you also need to like be on the same level as like your viewers, because we're all just people trying to get through this together. So I have to be in that mentality when I'm writing my stories, so that it doesn't come out as, here's terrible news that just happened. Like, I got to start my script with like, hey, like, it's been a long day. We're going to get you through this. Here's some headlines that we're going to get through first, and then we're going to start explaining all of them. So you kind of just got to like be there with them, and you're not talking to them. You're kind of just having a conversation with them.
And you need to point that out. So you have the reporters writing the stories and you have this whole team doing this writing, you basically want to make it a way where people feel comfortable to listen to the news station, listen to the reporters, listen to everybody there.
Yeah, exactly. It all comes down to how you write it. Like you got to write conversationally, and you got to take into account how people are feeling right now, because there's a lot of emotions going around right now.
And so one of my last questions I want to ask you is, what advice would you give to anyone who wants to go into broadcast journalism?
I guess I like what I said earlier. Like you have to be conversational. You have to, when you come up with your stories, you have to think about the bigger picture and how you tell it. Like it all comes down to your writing and the visuals you're showing with these stories. So pay attention to the details, especially as a producer. You've got to pay attention to the details.
And the last question I want to ask you is there anything else you'd like to tell me? Anything else you'd like to add that you didn't get to,
Oh
get to
man,
say?
the industry has changed so much during this pandemic, but that should not scare anyone, because it really shows your strength in other places, and the way that we've all just come together. We are still getting news on the air, and there's only like 3 people physically in the newsroom. So yeah, like if we can get through this.
Thank you, Mandy. Thank you so much, Mandy, for taking the time to talk to me. And thank you for the work you're doing to keep us informed and safe. And thank you all for watching this episode of Reporting from the Frontline of the Pandemic. I've been talking to Mandy Cordero, the producer from WTSP 10 News in Tampa, Florida. I'm Luis Mercado.